Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Dancing Through It All podcast. I am your host, Holly Hoffman, and I am very excited to introduce my very dear dietitian friend, Miss Libby Parker from the Broadway Dietitian. Thank you so much, Libby, for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited that you're starting this podcast and honored to be on it.
Thank you. Did you want to say a tiny bit about yourself? I mean, I'll
Sure.
post your brief little bio in the description, but maybe they'd like to hear it directly from you.
Sure. So I am a certified eating disorder specialist, registered dietitian. I've been working with eating disorders and performers for over 12 years now as a dietitian. And throughout my life, I grew up dancing. I did a ton of musical theater. And so all of that kind of came together in what I created as my brand as the Broadway dietitian. So I really love working with performers of all types on creating the best health for their craft. So I, kind of marry sports nutrition, eating disorder, non-diet, weight inclusive philosophies, and that way I get to be still really close to my performing arts family. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, awesome. I love that. And it's so very needed. Which kind of brings me into my interview questions.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the diet culture is ruining dancers' health?
Yes. Um, I don't know how much you want me to expand on that because I know we're going to go through a lot of questions, but man, diet culture is ruining everyone's health. So I'll let you answer more or ask more specific questions on that, but it's ruining everybody's health.
Well, how about let's see here. What's the current trending fad? Like the what's it called? Intermittent fasting. Is this something
Mhm.
maybe I should be doing, or is this a bad idea as an athlete who wants to have peak performance?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Intermittent fasting has been so big in the news and everything the last couple of years. And before I even get into the specifics of that, I think it's important to kind of look at diet cycles that we go through. I feel like every 5 to 10 years, at least in the United States, and I think, in any first world countries, we really see these cycles of types of diets that come through, whether it's straight up restriction or carbs are bad or fats are bad or, like various things that are really predominant. And then we see kind of these offshoots of all these specific little named diets kind of coming off of that. So we're getting back into, I think, a really restrictive cycle here. And so that kind of leads me back to the intermittent fasting. And I, where do I want to start with it? Well, the short answer is it's a horrible idea for dancers. Okay. And I'll explain a little bit more of why. But if you are a dancer, I will highly, highly suggest do not do intermittent fasting. You need so much energy as an endurance athlete, which is what dancers are. So, especially if we're looking at it from a very scientific sports nutrition aspect, we do not want to be not fueling ourselves consistently. And I can go into more of like the actual body science on that. But with the intermittent fasting, for those that don't know a lot about it, there's a few different types. There's intermittent fasting where people will eat only a certain number of hours per day and fast the rest of it. Usually it's, I think, like an 8-16 kind of thing. So they'll allow themselves to eat within 8 hours of the day and then 16 hours they're fasting. Or they'll do like specific number of days per week where they limit themselves to a low amount of calories, and then the other days are sometimes, depending on the diet they're following, are just kind of a free-for-all. They can do whatever they want, or the other days will be perhaps a more sensible amount of food, but it still has a cutoff. So there's various ways that people are doing this. And, as with any of these diets, the thought is, and usually we see a little bit of weight loss in the beginning, but the thought is if we are limiting the amount of time that we're eating, then should lose weight. And with most fad diets like this, yeah, you'll see a little bit of weight loss in the beginning, and then it kind of depends on how strict and severe you are with it as to if the weight continues to fall off. And I have so many thoughts on that, but it can be very dangerous. Um, but why this is particularly bad for endurance athletes like dancers is we, as dancers, need to have a continuous trickle of nutrients coming in to maintain energy levels and for tissue repair. So, in our bodies, and I think we're going to get into these questions too of like kind of what foods to fuel with and everything, but endurance athletes need, in particular, a high amount of carbohydrates compared to perhaps a general population or non-endurance athletes. And we can only store usable amounts of carbohydrate in our body, whether it's in the form of free floating glucose in our bloodstream or in short term supply stored glycogen in our liver and muscle cells, up to a certain amount. So um, we can't really like carbo load like the way they thought about it back 50 years ago. It's not like, you have the huge pasta feast the night before and then you're good to go. It doesn't work that well. So we really do want to be continuously having food and particularly carbohydrate throughout the day to keep topping off these glycogen stores, because that is what's giving us the quick energy to jump, to run, to have that endurance that is different than if we're not doing endurance activities or if we're doing like say powerlifting or something like that. It's just a very different utilization of energy from the body. And so when we're not eating throughout the day, those glycogen stores get wiped out very quickly. And then you're going to have that hit the wall feeling. You're not going to be able to do all the things. And, beyond that, carbohydrates are really, it's our brain's main source of fuel. So we need like 300 grams of carbohydrate a day just to fuel our brain for thinking and, everything that we do with our brain.
I did not know
So,
this.
yeah, so it's really important that we're continuously filling this up, because either if we eat a bunch and then don't eat anything of any type of food, not just carbs, but we will just store it as fat, and then we can't repurpose that into carbohydrate very easily. It takes a lot of work. So if we're eating, if we're just kind of taking this into what people have probably heard of before, but doing like mini meals throughout the day is going to be much better for our body and our nutrition than eating all of our food in a short period of time and then not eating for the rest of the day. Even if we, take out all the other factors, like if we're having, I'm going really fast here, but the the way I like to describe this, if we have the same person on 2 different days, they're eating the exact same foods, exact same calories, everything is exactly the same on these 2 different days. On one day, they spread all of that food out evenly throughout their waking hours. They're having mixed meals of different nutrients. Everything is just really nicely spread out throughout the day. The other day, they eat all of that exact same food within, say, a 2 hour window of time. The difference is going to be that the day that they eat all of that food in a short period of time, they are going to, one, put on more actual fat mass. We're adding adipose tissue there, which is, when a lot of people go on these diets, not that I'm someone who advocates for weight loss, but like the main reason people are doing this is they want to lose fat, right? So you're already kind of ruining that. And they're going to be much more lethargic. Their body is not going to be operating at its optimal level. Um, if we're looking at like a micronutrient stance of vitamins and minerals, a lot of those things we can only utilize so much at a time. And the rest are, if they're water soluble vitamins, we're just peeing them out. You're not getting the full use of all of that. So there's a lot going on there where honestly, just spreading your food out throughout the day is going to be the best way to take care of your health and to be fueled for your sport.
Well, thank you. That's so many more questions now started with.
That's how it works.
Um, let's jump into so BMI, the body mass index.
Mm,
Good grief, index.
mhm.
Is that something we should really be like paying attention to still, or is this kind of old school of thought, or is there a different KPI, performance index that we should be looking at instead?
I love that you're speaking my language there. Um, yeah, I don't know if what words are allowed in your podcast, but the BS
There's no
measuring
swear
index.
words.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we don't really want to use BMI anymore. I think the main purpose that it still is in existence is that a lot of insurance companies require your in terms of my career, if I'm
Hmm.
seeing a client and I'm billing insurance, usually we have to put BMI for insurance reimbursement. That is literally the only reason I use BMI anymore for anything because it literally doesn't tell us anything about someone's health status. BMI was created, oh gosh, over 150 years ago now, I
Oh,
believe.
good grief.
Yeah, and the population that was used to create the BMI from these researchers was healthy young white men, like European white men.
Hmm.
So it does not take into effect the different body compositions of women versus men. It does not take into account body composition of different ethnicities and what's, appropriate for different ethnicities. So it really isn't giving a good picture of health of people in general. And if we also just think of like how different people's lifestyles were 150 years ago, realistically, more movement, less processed food, things were going to be a little different and and also less, new medical care and medication and different ways that we are able to take care of our health in general. So there's a lot of factors at play. So when we're looking at weight in terms of indication of health, it can be a data point, but it is not an end all be all. It is one data point of many, many, many. So I think BMI just needs to go away. I think every individual has their own happy weight, is what I like to call it. And
Hmm.
that's going to fluctuate with age and day to day. Like just for a normal human being, your weight can fluctuate about 5 pounds a day just from fluid balance and if you've been to the bathroom and what you ate and and it'll just fluctuate. It's not going to be, strictly, oh, you gained or you lost weight and that's an end all be all number.
I swear it depends on weather too.
Yeah, probably.
It's like it's cold. What? I'm heavier today.
Well, I mean, that's also something, if we look at what people eat seasonally too, if you truly are eating what is in season, what feels good in season, in winter when we're colder, we're, typically, if you're listening to your body or you're eating what is in season, you're eating heavier, probably more calorie dense foods. Our bodies naturally want to put on some more weight in the winter just to keep us warm. And
Hmm.
because we are technically burning more calories at rest, just shivering and trying to stay warm, it's just a very like normal adaptation. And then in the summer, we're typically not eating those same types of foods. We're eating perhaps more leafy plants and fruits and lighter foods. And so that has a direct impact as well.
Awesome. Okay, so I feel like I need to stop looking at the scale because I feel
Yes.
so personally, I have some condition which gets better if I lose weight. Um, Theoretically, I have not lost any weight. I have, gosh, boosted my exercise tremendously, which makes me so hungry.
Hmm.
But I have been well, I kind of have to go with a more high protein diet just because I am allergic to wheat and corn and I don't like rice. So that
Hmm.
just kind of limits me automatically to like fruits and vegetables and meat, just like
Mm.
naturally. Or maybe I'm just not very creative with food. Um, but like I feel so much better. I have more energy, but I have like no metrics that kind of show like if I go to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, well, you should be losing weight." But I'm not. I look better. I feel better. I have lots of energy and I'm really strong now. Thank you for, bar lifting
Hmm.
weights and all the, oh gosh, I have a husky, so I have to walk him like 2 miles a day.
Yeah.
And then that's half of his walks. And then my husband walks him another 2 miles later. So, I mean, I'm getting lots of exercise.
Hmm.
I'm eating right. I try not to have like any processed foods. If I do, try to, watch out for the bad things like dyes. I threw everything in my house away that has dye in it. But yeah, is there like something specific, those of us who are horribly uneducated in nutrition past, what we little we knew in the early 90s should be looking at instead?
Yeah, well, so as I said, weight is just one data point of so many. So the fact that you said you're feeling stronger, you're feeling more energized, you're in better shape, like those are all like even if they're not super quantifiable in terms of numbers, like that's amazing. Like maybe you can quantify like what is your one rep max with different weights, different types of strength things. So that's something that if you need to have a number around something, that's a much safer way to do it than I think your body weight. But if we're looking at like actual health indicators, and I don't know what condition you have, and we don't need to discuss that on your podcast, but if you're going to
Thanks.
your doctor, you're probably getting your labs drawn. And so, how is your blood work, your blood pressure, heart rate, all of that stuff looking? How are all of those metrics looking? Because that's going to be a much better indicator of your actual health. We have people who are in, what we would technically call obese or overweight bodies who have stellar labs and no chronic health conditions. We've seen people reverse their type 2 diabetes without actually losing weight. So, weight is just one data point of so many, and it is not the end all be all to what health is. And I think it really should be just in our society, we need to think less about body weight as an indicator of health because it's not a primary indicator of health.
And as far as healthy eating goes, I know there's, gosh, like there's the keto and there's
Ugh.
paleo. I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Paleo?
I'm like, I don't know what it is. But
Uh,
I know there's like people who are trying to eat healthy.
mhm,
I mean, a lot of it is probably marketing.
mhm, mhm.
When does that rigorous attention to what you're putting in your diet, good grief, in your body, when does your diet start becoming unhealthy?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so much I want to say on this. I want to start with just kind of like diets, and then we'll get into like what is actually healthy and when does it become a real problem. You know, for the most part, and I never like to talk in absolutes. And, I'm not an always
Hmm.
never kind of person because I think there's places for certain things. But in general, if a diet has a name, it's probably not ideal and it's probably a marketing gimmick. So, and I talk about this in, shameless plug in my book, Permission to Eat, kind of what is the deal with like marketing of diets and everything. And how most fad diets work is they remove a food or a food group that you love and perhaps overeat on. And by elimination, you tend to consume fewer calories, which results in at least initial weight loss. And that's kind of the premise behind that. So, and if we're looking at just straight up, did we lose weight? Well, if you're following the diet really strictly, probably, at least initially. Usually, any sort of weight loss will slow down and plateau over time, and the initial weight loss lost is typically water weight, particularly for cutting out carbohydrates or lessening that. That's a whole another science lesson there.
Mhm.
But what happens when you've cut out foods that you truly love for an extended period of time? One of two things happens. Most commonly, it's not sustainable and people cave and, quote unquote, fall off the wagon of their
That's
diet.
me.
Yeah. And they eat the thing, they probably gain weight back. Most diets end up with the person gaining back more weight than they lost. So they end up at a higher weight than they started. So there's that. But also, there is the mental part of this of, oh my God, I'm a failure. I can't stick to this diet. I'm such a loser. I'm a horrible person. I'm fat. Like we go through this shame cycle, which for a lot of people, and this kind of goes into the disordered eating cycle, is I I failed, so I'm going to double down and do this better. I'm going to do good. I'm going to restrict harder. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to compensate, like whatever that thing is, which inevitably is leading us to hunger and or deprivation. And that could be literal, I'm not eating enough hunger, or it
Mhm.
could be depriving themselves of things that they really love, or depriving themselves of essential nutrients because they're cutting out specific food groups. And that hunger and deprivation will inevitably lead to binging or subjective overeating. So, for someone, let's say, who has anorexia and isn't eating enough, like I've had so many clients where they eat so little and then they eat like a normal portion bowl of cereal, like a cup of cereal, and they're like, "Oh my God, I binged. I'm such a horrible person." And it's like, no, that was great. You could eat more. But to them, it's they failed. There's that self-loathing,
Mhm.
all that hatred, and then they go back and they double down harder on restricting. So that cycle goes round and round and round. Um, and I'm going in so many, I want to go in so many directions right now, but I think there's two things I want to really talk about here. So for the average dieter that does not develop an eating disorder, what we see through a lot of people's lives is kind of what I just discussed there of they're following whatever diet. Most of these, again, are not super healthy, and we could go into details on like any of the popular ones if you want, but they quote unquote fail at this diet.
Mhm.
They gain back the weight that they lost, whether or not it's plus some. Usually there's a little bit extra gained with any of these. But for people who continuously weight cycle, so if we're going like, say, up and down 20 pounds over and over throughout their life, number one, those people, it has been proven that they have a shorter lifespan because of the diet cycling. And that every time that we bring ourselves into a lower like calorie level that we're taking in every day, our metabolism lowers and our body requires fewer calories to maintain our weight. So then when we do eat more, it is our body naturally adds on more body fat. So if we had just stayed eating the more food that we started with, it would actually be easier to lose weight than going through all of these diets over and over again.
Mhm.
So then to go to the other side of this, so now if the person goes the other direction and goes into a full-blown eating disorder, oh my gosh, I mean, this is my expertise area, so I could talk for hours and hours on this. So I'll try to keep it to
Well,
the
we'll let
point.
them call you instead.
Yeah. Taking clients in California, New York, and select other states. So, but where this becomes problematic is the rigidity around food. And there are so many different types of eating disorders, and I think we're going to discuss that a little bit as well.
Mhm.
But if we're looking at it from the lens of like obsessive dieting, going more in that route, probably someone is restricting, potentially anorexia or similar disorders. So number one, we've got not enough energy to really take them through the day. Organs will start shutting down. Mental health is compromised, cognitive functioning really goes down in as little as 10 weeks of underfueling, whether or not it's an eating disorder. The brain actually starts to shrink and thinking becomes more and more rigid, which is also why the eating disorders tend to kind of snowball because they start thinking that they're more and more right, and their behaviors become more rigid, they become less trusting of science, all of that. And that's for the most part reversible. The brain can replenish, as far as I understand, but it is something that gets really, really difficult to um, try to logic someone out of because they're so deep in it.
Is there kind of a time generally that you see, or is it like oh, it takes like a month, like they say to break a form a habit is 21 days, and then
Mm.
it's like twice as long to get rid of that. Is that something where the longer they've been struggling with that, the longer it takes to recover, or how long does that process usually take?
Yeah, I would say probably. I don't know that there's any numbers around that because it's kind of different based on like how abruptly, I guess, it kind of gets started or not. Like for a lot of people who do develop eating disorders, it's not, well, it never really seems to be a conscious decision. Like eating disorders are not a choice. I will say that. They
Mhm.
do often come out of well-intentioned diets or like, some like, I'll be upfront. Like I had my own eating disorder in college and it started as I'm going to get healthier. I'm going to trade after school eating a sleeve of Oreos for eating an apple. And I don't think anyone would say that that was a bad decision, but it snowballed and became more and more rigid. But there was also that perfect storm of, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. We had all the diet culture around us, all the media. My mom was constantly on a diet, so it was kind of in the home, even though she never like pressured me with it. I saw her hating her body, and I think that's a really common thing that has an impact. So, when I was 10, 14 years old, I wasn't doing anything, wrong with my body. I was just being a kid. I was totally normal, but I was seeing that. And
Mhm.
eventually that caught up with me when I was in my later teens and early 20s. And it was like, it wasn't even a conscious thought. It was just like I grew up with it. It's so normal to be on a diet. And then I just, my eating disorder took over and it went more extreme. I don't remember where I was going with all of that. But oh, in terms of, reversing that and recovery, there isn't like hard timelines on how, like the length of time it takes someone to get like really bad or like, stats around that. But there is a lot of evidence that the sooner someone gets help getting into their eating disorder, the much better the prognosis. So
Mhm.
if someone is like just starting to show signs of disordered eating or like just gets diagnosed with something, most people honestly don't even get diagnosed. You don't need to have an actual diagnosis to seek help. I think that's important to know, because less than a third of people who actually would clinically qualify for an eating disorder diagnosis will ever get diagnosed.
Oh.
Yeah, because a lot of doctors don't know how to catch it, or they're saying, "Oh, your weight's fine," or whatever. So, but anyway, the point of this is like the sooner that you start getting help and start working on recovery, the more likely you are to fully recover and be healthy and have great quality of life. The longer it goes on, the less likely you are to recover, the more likely you are to have severe health complications for the rest of your life and worse quality of life, perhaps shorter life, for various reasons.
So what can we do as parents of dancers, as teachers, or ourselves as
Mhm.
dancers? What are there specific things we should be watching out for to make sure our pursuit of health and peak performance does not develop into an eating disorder, or catch one if it's started out that way?
Yeah, I think I'm going to speak specifically to like parents and teachers to just start this off, or if you influence other people. number one is not talking about your body or other people's bodies. I think that's really hard as dancers and dance teachers because, we're talking about having the long lines and,
Hmm.
like absolutely we want to have correct form. And I think that is what mirrors are for, and that is what teachers are for. We do want to have correct form, both for the aesthetic of dance as well as safety, of course, just like with any sort of exercise. But particularly in the dance studio, we don't need to be talking about weight, BMI, what someone looks like, what ourselves look like. Again, things that tend to hit people more is watching people that they look up to, whether that's parents, teachers, mentors, older siblings, whatever, talking negatively about their own bodies. That really clicks because a lot of the time, particularly younger people who are looking up to these people are like, wow, this is someone I really respect and want to emulate, and they're gorgeous, but they hate their body. And I think they're beautiful, and I don't think I'm as beautiful as they are. So if they're concerned about their body, then I must be concerned about my body. And that can become a really negative place. So I think like just on the base level, that would be number one for me is just don't talk about anyone's bodies, including your own. If you have your own body image stuff going on, number one, please seek help, seek therapy for that. But number two, even if you're having those thoughts, please don't say them out loud around other
Hmm.
people, because you never know how someone is taking that. I think another thing, specifically to dance teachers, I will say right now is don't tell your dancers how to eat. Unless you are a registered dietitian and have had that training, I think it's very harmful. We see a lot of dance instructors, whether their intention is there or not. I like to believe that most people are doing this from a good place and they just don't know better. But a lot of
Oh,
times,
certainly.
yeah, they're talking, in terms of diets or, I used to do this and it worked for me. And you're different than someone else.
Hmm.
And we see a lot of like top performing art schools, the dance teachers are giving diet advice on how to lose the weight. And it's really, really harmful. I think, in terms of smaller studio owners and teachers like yourself, what I typically see is not any people saying, like, oh, you need to do this to lose weight, but it's more like, oh, I've done this before, so why don't you try this? And it comes again from a really great intention, but it might not be the right thing for that person.
Hmm.
And as a non professional who doesn't know their health and medical history, you're not the right person to be giving that advice. I think as far as things that dance teachers can be saying about food and nutrition is making sure that the dancers are eating something that day. We want to, keep them away from any sort of fasting or diets. You can be talking about like, hey, has everyone had some fuel today?
Hmm.
If you're
So
going to
fuel
be
sounds like a good, safe word.
typically, it's a safe word. There's triggers for everything nowadays.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
I guess it depends on your individual dancers.
fuel is typically a safe word. Nutrition is typically a safe word. If we're looking at like the dictionary definition of what a diet is, it is what you eat.
Hmm.
So diet should be a fine word, but people take it to a weight loss diet. So I don't like
Yeah.
using the word diet. But you could say like, have you had nutrition today? Have you had fuel today? If you're doing, if you have like a long day of rehearsals, like you have company dancers who are there for hours and hours, making sure that there are breaks for them to have snacks, have lots of water, um, maybe even providing some snacks, especially if you potentially have dancers who are food insecure and don't have things to bring or forgot, like having some snacks on hand, I think is a really great thing that studios can offer. But just making sure that they have time set aside that it is not only allowed but encouraged to be eating, because I hear from so many people that are in these, back-to-back rehearsals, especially like company dancers. It's like, well, we have 5 to 15 minutes between classes, and in that time I want to rest. I want to talk to my friends. I need to go to the bathroom. No one else is eating, so I feel awkward eating.
Hmm.
So making it more normalized that, yeah, it's totally okay and encouraged to grab a snack between your classes, fuel when you need to. Please drink lots of water. Water is so important. And just, yeah, I think normalizing that is really one of the biggest things.
I'm going to kind of skip around. I know I
Mhm.
sent you some interview questions that I was going to ask,
Yeah.
but this is taking me to kind of a different, slightly route.
Mhm.
Are there certain foods that dancers should be eating before like a long day of rehearsals? Like I know, like I'll tell my daughter, like you need to have protein to support you through the
Mhm.
day. Am I wrong in that? Are there other nutrients I should be focusing on? So yeah, if they're, let's say
Mhm.
they're going through a long day of rehearsals, or maybe it's well, it's now, competition convention season. So
Mhm.
when they have, a day of convention classes followed by
Yeah.
competition, it's hard to get food in them, like to
Mhm.
fuel their little bodies.
Yeah.
Are there certain things I should be kind of prioritizing, like, oh, make sure you eat this and this, and if you don't eat that other thing, that's okay.
Yeah. Again, like, to just repeat myself, like everyone's super individualized. However,
Hmm.
um, there isn't any specific foods that are going to be like, yes, absolutely eat this specific thing or don't eat this specific thing, because there isn't like a miracle food that's going to give you like the perfect energy or whatever. We really kind of going back to what I was talking about with like that spread out food. We want to have mixed meals and snacks. When I say that, I mean a mix of carbs, fats, and proteins coming from different sources. So we're getting different vitamins and minerals in there as well. And that should be ideally every time that we eat, we're getting kind of mixed foods. That being said, snacks, that's not always possible. When we're
Hmm.
on the go, it's not always possible. So that's fine. We want to be attempting that. What I will say about long days or performances is we just want to be a little more careful about how we're eating in terms of like what we're eating and timing, but also particularly in terms of performances, I think it's really important to not eat something new for the first time that day. So we want to, just as we are rehearsing for our performance, we want to rehearse the foods that we're eating before we dance or whatever. So that can be, um, here, I'll give an example of in college, I was also a runner. And so this really came very prevalent for me as I was getting into doing races and morning runs and things like that is, I loved to have oatmeal in the morning. And what I was finding is if I had oatmeal and immediately went on a run, I had horrible side stitches. It
Oh
like
no.
really didn't feel good. And like again, oatmeal's a very healthy food. It's going to give
Hmm.
me great energy. It's going to stick with me and like, maintain that energy, especially, mixing it with some protein and stuff in there too. But for me, it was the timing. I couldn't have it within like 20 to 30 minutes before the run. I needed like a good hour to let that digest before I could go on that run with that fuel in me. So I had to start thinking about what else is going to work for me. And what was probably happening with that is because that is a very fibrous, complex carbohydrate, it was requiring a lot of work by my body to break it down, which meant that my blood and my energy was all going to my gut to work on breaking that down instead of
Hmm.
going to my extremities so that I could go on a run. And so it was really compromising my body in that way. So I switched to having a banana and peanut butter when I needed something quick before a run. And because that could break down more easily in my body, it wasn't causing that same problem. So, what I do to say this is not that either of those meals was a wrong option for someone, it's you need to test this out for yourself and see what is working specifically for you and your digestion and your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like to steer away from having any like singular ingredient. Like I was saying, like I would have, the oatmeal with some form of protein, whether that was adding some nuts to it or peanut butter or protein powder or whatever, or I was having the banana with peanut butter. It wasn't just the banana, it wasn't just the oats. We want to have those mixes because that's going to help you, one, get just better nutrition in, two, it's going to sustain the release of that energy into your bloodstream. It's going to keep you full a little bit longer and more energized. So when we're looking at, pre-dance, pre-workout kind of things, we want to err on the side of a higher percentage of carbohydrate foods, but we want to have a little protein and or fat with that
Mm-hmm.
after dance, depending kind of on what you've been doing throughout the day, what time. Like it could be you're just having a normal dinner or whatever, and that's perfect. Or if we're needing to do more of a snack, it's going to be a little higher on the protein side, but still having some carbohydrate because we need to replenish those carbohydrate stores like glycogen in the body. And throughout the day, making sure that we're getting in little snacks. And I think for like long competition, performance, rehearsal days, it can be really helpful to have like small, frequent snacks. So, handful of trail mix, a piece of fruit, a granola bar, having just like little bits here and there. So it's not overloading your stomach, but it's keeping enough fuel in your body so that you can keep going.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Excuse me, as I've like completely lost my voice. I don't know. When it's rainy, my voice goes.
Yep.
um, okay, we've kind of touched on culture in the studio. So there, good grief. I'm editing that out. um, so I think probably the biggest mistake dancers make when fueling their bodies before a long day is, like you touched on earlier, like carb loading or trying to go like pure protein, low carbs. Like
Hmm.
sticking with one specific, I guess, nutrient would be kind of the biggest mistake.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. So, yeah, either not eating, I think that would be the biggest mistake if you just
Hmm.
don't have anything. So, similar to when I just think of like, kids going to school or going to work or whatever, like breakfast is important. I would rather you eat a donut than have nothing in the morning. I would rather you have a piece of fruit than nothing. Like, I want you to get something in your body because after you've been asleep, we need to break the fast, breakfast,
Hmm.
and get something in there. So that would be like my number one rule. But then, yeah, to what you were saying, of single nutrients, we do really want to have that mix. I think that's going to be really, really important. Um, Mainly just for good health, but also to just have that energy. And to kind of reiterate on that like carb loading thing, it's not that it's horrible to eat a bunch of carbohydrates. Like, I don't want people to be afraid of that, but it's not sticking with you as long as it, used to be thought of. When we
Hmm.
just think of like having the big pasta feed before the night before a sporting event, it doesn't stay that long. You can have a normal meal of pasta and whatever else, and then get up in the morning and have a normal breakfast and go do your sport. It doesn't need to be so I just kind of want to go back to like all or nothing. Like it's really not we people try to complicate things too much. Eating really doesn't need to be that difficult.
Hmm.
I feel like it should be common sense, but people have made it so particular and are trying to like overuse data. And humans lived for thousands of years without having all this information and data that we have now. It wasn't until the 1990s that calories were even required on packaging in the US. So like this is a lot of new information that we have, and people lived for thousands of years before that and were dancing and doing other sports and having perfectly
Hunting
normal
and
lives.
running from saber-toothed tigers. I don't know.
Exactly.
um, are there any, gosh, for those of us who have smallish picky eater dancers, or even myself, like I I don't want breakfast in the morning. Like it's just like, ugh, is there um like I'm against processed foods kind of in general because I just they seem very unnatural to me. And I have a hard time believing that's better for your body than like fresh foods. But if you just don't have the time to, eat like a salad and a, I don't know, potato and some, meat, or you only have enough time for like 5 bites as you're running from one class to the other,
Mhm.
are there any foods that you would recommend that have like a good blend of those nutrients?
Yeah, I think I'll speak more broadly to what you just said first. So, in an ideal world, would we eat totally unprocessed food in terms of like, like packaged high processed food? Because technically everything gets processed. That's
Yeah,
how we
like baby
cook,
carrots are
that's how we cook it
processed.
or whatever. Yeah, right. But I know what you're getting at, like the fresher foods that don't have a ton of ingredients added, right?
Hmm.
In an ideal world, sure. However, the majority of processed foods are not harmful, especially when eaten in appropriate amounts. If all you're doing is eating ultra processed foods and you're eating large amounts of them, yeah, that's problematic. But if you're having an Eggo waffle in the morning and you're having fresh foods throughout the day, like not a big deal. Like I would rather, again, you get something in than nothing.
Hmm.
It's not going to harm you, and in fact, not eating is going to be more harmful than having that. For people that struggle to have breakfast in the morning, like you're not hungry for it, couple different things that you can do with that. One is see how soon after waking up you can get something in. Again, it doesn't need to be like some big elaborate breakfast, but like, could you get a couple bites of something in within an hour of waking up? That would be great. Can we start kind of walking it back? Like if you don't eat anything for, let's say, 3 hours after you wake up right now, could we move it back to 2.5 and then 2 hours and, start bringing it back a little bit to get that fuel in earlier? And for a lot of people that don't have an appetite in the morning, it's usually from one of two reasons. It's either that's just kind of the habit that you've gotten yourself into, which I think is a lot of people just like, I just haven't eaten breakfast for 20 years. And so that's where I say like kind of walking it back can be helpful.
Hmm.
The other primary reason that that happens is people who eat a lot late at night, and so then they're not hungry when they wake up because they ate maybe the majority of their food or they binge ate or whatever before bed. Or they wake up in the night and eat because that's another thing that can happen. So in that case, if we're looking at it from more of like a binge eating standpoint, we want to start forcing breakfast even when it doesn't feel good, in an attempt that if you're feeling more full during the day, hopefully you'll eat less at night. And over the course of a couple of weeks, the eating at night will taper off and the morning eating will get easier. That's a
Was
very
it better
simplified version, but
like for high performance requirements for
Mhm.
dancers, it sounds like it's better to kind of shift that um like loading, like personally, I got into the habit of not eating a lot in the morning. Like I'd have like a banana at
Mhm.
max, because if I have food on my stomach before doing shows and dancing at an amusement park when it's hot, first of all, I don't want to eat a lot when it's hot, and
Mhm.
then I just feel so gross and just laden down, and I had this like 20-pound costume that I
Oh
had to
yeah.
wear. So I needed to
Mhm.
be, light in my stomach. But it sounds like that was kind of a a big mistake. It sounds like I kind of screwed myself over there.
Yeah, well, I
So
think
I
if
should
you're
probably like
if you're
shift it to more breakfast and less dinner.
yeah. I mean, think about what you just said there. Like you were dancing in the heat and carrying a heavy costume. I feel
Yeah,
like that requires some energy in this tank. I
little
like
bit.
it. Yeah. And so if you eat at night and then let's say you sleep for, ideally 8 hours, I'm guessing, depending, maybe it wasn't, but let's say you slept for 8 hours, then you got up, you got ready, 2 hours later, you start working and all of that stuff. And hopefully you ate lunch or something. So you're now going like what, 12 plus hours without eating, and you've already been dancing. Your body has depleted all of its easy energy stores. So it's working really, really hard to break down fat stores. And we don't exclusively break down body fat, we also break down muscle tissue for energy requirements. So depending on how extreme the lack of energy was in there, then perhaps you're getting some muscle wasting and you're burning a lot of calories doing all this dance in the heavy costume in the heat and all of that stuff. And yeah, it just sounds like kind of a bad cycle to get in there. And yes, at the end of the day, we do want to be eating and refueling. Like we want to top off the tank again. But
Mhm.
at sleep, we don't just like power off and not utilize anything. We are using calories throughout the night. So whatever we ate before bed isn't just magically there in the morning. We've depleted a good chunk of that. So we need to, if we're thinking of our body as like a car, we need to put fuel in the gas tank before the car can drive.
Mhm. Sounds like I need to up my breakfast game. Well, I've discovered I'm like obsessed with coconut, and I
Mhm.
discovered this coconut creamer for my coffee. So at least I get like something in me in the
Mhm.
form of like fats without being like I can't stand milk. It's gross. Cheese I love, but
Mhm.
I can't go near milk. I don't know why. It's just since I was like 8, I just thought it was gross. Not that milk is gross. It's just I can't
Some people have
bring
that, yeah.
myself to drink it. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. Um, but yeah, I know for like oh gosh, the competition convention scene at hotels, it is insane in the morning at breakfast time trying to, like even when they have like the buffets which move
Mhm.
pretty quickly, there's
Mhm.
just not enough time to sit down and eat, especially if you have
Mhm.
slow little eaters.
Mhm.
Is there anything kind of packable? Like I'll bring bananas
Mhm.
and I'd love to bring yogurt, but those the hotel refrigerators are so tiny,
Mhm.
you can't bring much, and those
Mhm.
shelf stable yogurts are
No,
so
no.
high in sugar. It's like 11 grams of sugar for this little pouch. Is
Yeah.
that a bad idea, or do you think that amount of sugar is actually okay in the morning?
I heard two different questions in that.
Yes,
So,
sorry.
no, no, I'm just trying to think of how I'm going to do the easier one first, and then we'll get into the one I think you want more answered more. So the easier question is number one. I don't know that I've necessarily heard of shelf stable yogurt. That makes me a little wary. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
that's what I was kind of,
like
huh.
so there.
It might be more sugar than yogurt.
Well, beyond that, the point of yogurt beyond calcium and protein is like the probiotic factor, right? So
Hmm.
those live cultures. So for something to be shelf stable that's dairy based, it would have to have ultra high heat temperature, UHT, which is like what happens when you get like the little individual coffee creamers that are shelf stable.
Hmm.
So that's UHT processing. So that would effectively kill off anything. And I honestly, like, if you were to, you know, for me, like those little coffee creamer packets, they taste nasty. They taste burnt to me versus if you had like just refrigerated cream that wasn't UHT, it tastes a little more normal.
Hmm.
Um, so not having had these like shelf-stable yogurts you're talking about, I'm like, number one, it probably tastes bad. The active cultures are probably not present. Like that to me is just like, why? I mean, if that's your only option, sure, but why? Um, to the question of sugar though, so dairy in general actually has a lot of naturally occurring sugar. So carbohydrates are sugar.
Hmm.
All carbohydrate, whatever it's, whether it's coming from table sugar or an apple or um, lettuce or a cookie, it all breaks down to the same chemical composition, right? So that's not so much the problem. It's like how much sugar are they adding? So for a, you know, cup of milk or a yogurt that doesn't have anything added to it, we are still expecting to have a specific amount of sugar in it. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how much, but that's just going to be because it is milk based. It
Right.
has sugar there. That is also when people are lactose intolerant. Lactose is the milk sugar, so they're intolerant to the sugar in the milk, and they because their body is not producing enough of the enzyme lactase, which breaks apart the milk sugar so they can digest it. So it's not an allergy. It's just they don't have enough of the enzyme to break down the sugar in milk. That's what that is.
Hmm.
Um, that said, a lot of like the flavored yogurts do have a lot of sugar added to them. Do we want to do that often? No. Every now and then, not a big deal. I'm not anti-sugar. I think sugar can be a good, quick source of energy, especially for dancers. Like, that's not a problem, but that shouldn't be your go-to.
So like save it for after performing, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, it
I mean,
doesn't
not yogurt
matter. It's not so
specifically.
much like when, like it's totally fine before performing because again, it's giving us that quick energy from carbohydrates. Like in that sense, whether you're having fruit or jelly beans, it doesn't matter so much in terms of the carbohydrate content because it's all getting broken down to the same thing. The difference is the jelly beans are going to give you that really quick energy, and apple is going to require more digestion. And so that could, in the short term, slow you down. It could cause gas and bloating. And, this is sounding really like obviously I want people to eat more fruit than candy. Sure.
Right.
But when we're thinking about like one of the things I talk about in a lot of my presentations to performers is avoiding digestive issues on stage. And this always baffles people of like, yeah, the things that we like traditionally would say, please eat more of these, like you got to think about timing. Yeah,
Like broccoli.
I want you to have broccoli and beans and all the vegetables and all the fiber, but not like shortly before you're going to go on stage. That's a bad idea for so many reasons. Um, so that could
Hope
be
you're not
something.
mic'd up.
Yeah, so it could be more of a we're having more of the even if we want to say like more of the processed foods pre-performance and more of the natural high fiber foods post-performance. Like if you're going to have a bean burrito, please eat that after the show.
Hmm.
That's a great thing to eat. Please don't eat it right before because you will regret it.
I don't want to cramp up on stage. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. So we kind of touched on that intermediate, good grief, intermittent fasting,
Mhm.
which I think I did by accident in my teens when
Mhm.
performing and not eating breakfast.
Yeah,
um, so that's definitely, I think you've pretty
bad
much
idea.
put
Yeah.
the hack on that one.
Yeah, yeah, don't do it. And well, I think what you kind of hit the nail on the head there too of like a lot of people, I don't think intentionally even do it. It doesn't make it any less harmful. It's like whether you're actively saying, "Ooh, I'm not going to eat for these hours," or it's just like, "Oh, I got busy and forgot." Your
Hmm.
body doesn't know. Your body's going to respond the same way. So that's something where, if you're someone who is busy and is just going to forget, it could be setting reminders on your phone or like making it a habit at a certain time or between classes that you're going to have something, packing food. If you're like a parent of someone who's like this, making sure that they have food packed and you're following up on that. Um, just really doing whatever you need to get the barriers out of the way to make sure that you are consistently fueling.
I've actually discovered, because I'm horrible about that. I'll get busy and I just forget to eat
Mhm.
because my brain, I don't know, is too busy processing other things, forgets to pay
Yep.
attention to my body. But I've started not hoarding, but I will have stashes of snacks in my vehicles, in my
Mhm.
laptop case.
Brilliant.
Whenever I think about it, I'll like stuff it in my girls' dance bags
Mhm.
because I'm so bad about making time to, eat food for myself. Now I'm like paranoid, like, make sure you always have food. Don't go without food.
Yeah. So what I will say to that is fantastic.
Oh, good.
Always please be packing things, but then you actually have to remember to eat them too.
Yes.
Um, that's the other half of this is like packing them, amazing, but the other 50% is eating it. And because I remember having this discussion with a client one time of, it was someone with an eating disorder. We were trying to get them to pack snacks so that they would eat. I believe it was a college student. And they were so proud. They came to session like, I've been carrying around protein bars all week. And I'm like, did you eat any? No. I'm like, snacks are not accessories. We need to use them.
Look at
It
this
actually,
thing in my purse.
yeah, it actually prompted me to make a Instagram post of I took like various like I had like granola bars and little fruit snacks and stuff, and I like made jewelry out of them. Like I like taped granola bars onto earrings and like had them on. So it's like, and the post was like, snacks are not accessories.
That's amazing. I need to find that. Is it still on your page?
Yeah, it's on my old Instagram. It's not your average nutritionist.
Oh, I think I'm following that on my
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
account. I'll
So
have to find
most
that
of my
again.
eating disorder content is still on that one, but then I, restarted my business, and so the Broadway Dietitian's my new one.
Hmm.
Honestly, that is almost more like a personal account. More of my like nutrition and eating disorder content is still on Not Your Average Nutritionist.
Okay. I'll have to link that one too.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm looking at the lights. It's hard for me to like read my papers now. It's just this big old, I don't know what that negative image on my papers now. Good grief. Ugh.
Mhm.
Oh, here's one. How much does what you eat actually affect injury recovery? Like, if you've, I mean, I kind of got an answer. Like, after having an emergency surgery, they told me, like, eat your, like your green leafy vegetables. But are there certain foods that actually help you recover? I know as dancers, we're always getting injured,
Mhm.
like torn muscles, skin burns
Mhm.
are, kind of a daily bruises. I don't know where
Yeah.
like any of my bruises came from. They're just there. Are there certain foods we should be focusing on to help our bodies recover?
Yes, that's a great question. So different types of injuries can have different requirements, but as a really general rule, so let's say torn muscles or any sort of skin stuff, like anything muscle or skin related, our primary um, fixing nutrient would be protein. So making sure that we're getting a lot of protein and a lot of water. We want to always be hydrating. That's going to be important for just everyday life.
Mhm.
But protein is going to be like our number one thing for muscle and skin recovery. And, we have a lot of evidence of this with like burn victims. So people who have
Mm.
lost a lot of skin and tissue from burns, protein needs go way, way, way up. So that's something where if you are recovering from any sort of, again, muscle or skin stuff, that's going to be really important for bones. So let's say you have a fracture or break, that's going to be one, just having a great mix of nutrients, maybe a little higher on the protein side than when you're actively dancing. And then, of course, making sure that we're keeping up with calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, which is in a lot of our green leafy vegetables. Um, and then for bruises, some of that can come just from lack of enough nutrition. So I see a lot of bruising again in people who aren't eating enough.
Hmm.
Obviously, like people are going to get banged up, and that's, neither here nor there of what you're eating. But for healing, I off the top of my head, I could be wrong with this, but I want to say vitamin K and vitamin C are going to be really important in that healing. So those
Sounds
are,
like a citrus kale salad is on the
yep,
way.
that can be helpful.
With some, I don't know,
Yeah,
chicken, some kind of
yeah,
protein.
yeah. There you
Chi
go.
beans or garbanzo beans. I don't know what they're supposed to. I grew up calling them chi beans.
Oh, I've never heard that one. Yeah, garbanzo beans or chickpeas. That's the other word for it.
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's where the chi came
Oh,
from.
that makes sense.
I don't know. I said chi beans to someone in college and they're like, what? I was like, you don't know what I'm talking about? So yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. Thought I'd share that. Um, so it's, I mean, my next question, actually, I'm kind of touching on this specifically for young dancers. What should younger dancers eat after a long night of classes, and how important is post-dance nutrition for recovery? And let's make sure that my brain is processing what you've been saying kind of this whole time.
Hmm.
So we want balanced nutrition of the carbs, the protein, and the fat.
Hmm.
Sounds like the carbs, I guess the simpler to digest carbs are kind of the best foods to eat before the long performing
Hmm.
days. The complex ones and the protein are good after. And it
Hmm.
sounds like protein's good during as well.
Yes, but in smaller amounts because that your body does require a lot of work to break down protein as well.
Okay.
So basically, your body requires more effort, energy, and blood flow to break down protein, fat, and complex carbohydrates. So basically, everything except for simple carbohydrates. So eating, we do want to have those throughout the day, but if we're doing a lot of activity, a lot of dance, we want to have those in smaller portions spread throughout so that we're not overloading our body. Like you don't want to, I don't know, have like a big steak in the middle of the day because
Yeah.
like your body's just gonna be like, oh my God, I can't dance now because it's not because it's like bad. It's just because like it's processing and the blood flow is not gonna go to your legs and arms, right?
Hmm.
So having like, again, like a handful of nuts or a hard-boiled egg or, whatever throughout the day, that's going to be like better ways to get your protein and fat in throughout the day.
So those are
Um,
easier to digest and I guess access quicker.
yeah, I mean, you could have like a small chunk of meat too, but like just, smaller things, just for the digestibility. Um,
Hmm.
and then yeah, afterwards, eating just, good balanced meal is really ideal. So I think of particularly with younger dancers, they're probably also in school and a lot of dance classes are happening on school nights and everything. So let's kind of take just like an I'm going to just kind of walk through like a ideal average day of a dancer who is in, let's say, middle school or high school and has dance class after school.
Perfect.
So get up in the morning, have breakfast before school, ideally a nice mixed meal with carbs, fats, and proteins. Get your body really set for the day. During school, there usually is some sort of snack break, and if not, grab something in the hall between classes or, whatever you need to do. I feel like for a lot of students now, lunches are getting pushed later and later, so I think it is helpful to have something kind of that mid-morning time.
Hmm.
Um, making sure that you are eating lunch. Something I've been hearing a lot is students not wanting to eat because their peers aren't eating or they're eating specific diets or whatever. I see this specifically in high school. Like a lot of them are like, well, none of my friends eat lunch. And like, well, you need to. You can be the good example, right?
Yeah.
So have lunch. You can bring it yourself. You can have hot lunch at school, whatever you need to do. Then when you are done with school, before you go into dance, whether you're going home or going straight over to the dance studio, have a snack that is higher in carbohydrate. This could be something like um, a peanut butter sandwich, granola bar, cheese and crackers. There's lots of different things, kind of whatever makes sense. Maybe some fruit in there, whatever you want to do. Then let's assume they have 2 to 3 hours of dance. During the whole day, they should have a water bottle and be sipping water throughout the day,
Mhm.
making sure that they're getting plenty of water there. If they're doing particularly strenuous dance, like if they're, sweating a lot, we probably do want to be replenishing with some electrolytes. I know this is one of the questions you had written down of like sports drinks and things like that.
Yeah. How
Um,
Gatorade, where do you stand?
yeah, yeah. So when we're having something that is when we're looking at just like general sports nutrition, I'm going to kind of finish this day and I'll come back to this, but um, if we're doing like strenuous activity for more than an hour, sweating a lot, or it's like we're out in the sun, it's really hot, it's a good time to add in a sports beverage or some electrolytes. Doesn't need to be like the whole, 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade. It could be maybe half
Hmm.
of that or something. And having water with that. They're not meant to be consumed just as is. They are actually meant to be cut with water. So just you can alternate or you can dilute it. Liquid IV is another really popular one now. Any of those,
Is it good though?
yeah,
I
let me get
haven't
through the
looked
rest
at
of this
the
day. We'll get
box.
back to that. Let me get through the rest of the ideal day here,
Okay.
right? So potentially needing some electrolytes in that mix. Or if they're still hungry, especially for growing bodies, you might need another snack during the dance time, depending on how much is happening. Go home, have a full balanced dinner, kind of what we think of like traditional meals would be great. And then, probably doing homework and whatever else they need to do. If their energy needs are higher, probably having another snack before bed and then get really good sleep. So that would be like an ideal day for an active dancer in school. Um, Going back to the sports beverages now. So, yes, they are actually really helpful. And so when we're looking at sports drinks or electrolyte drinks, what we're really looking for is um, 4 or 5 ingredients. So should be carbohydrates. We actually don't want to do like the Gatorade Zero or Powerade Zero or whatever. We do want those calories in there because that's coming from, again, our quick source of glucose. So
Hmm.
that's going to be helpful for maintaining energy. It can also make it so that they don't need to eat as much in there, which can be helpful for the digestive process, which is why these are really popular with endurance athletes like marathon runners, dancers, all of that. We want sodium, potassium, magnesium, and potentially one other um, mineral in there as well. I can't remember. I think those are kind of the main ones though. So that's what we're looking for when we're looking for some sort of sports beverage. What we do not want in any of these sports beverages, whether you're a child or an adult, is caffeine or other like energy sources. When we think of it, like we don't want it to be something that's like an energy drink.
Hmm.
Energy drinks are really that is my really hard line of the one thing I don't want anyone consuming is energy drinks like Rockstar, Red Bull, Monster, Celsius, like any of that kind of stuff. Those can be really dangerous. Um, but with these sports drinks, they're helpful if someone is sweating a lot out in the heat, if they're doing a lot of strenuous activity, to be sipping that along with water throughout the workout. Um, so ones that I really like, if someone has, if you're team or whatever is sponsored by like Gatorade or Powerade, that's fine. Like those are totally fine. Um, I've been really liking the liquid IVs, but there are plenty of other, smaller brands. I don't know all of them. I don't really keep up on it, but there's plenty that do really fit that. You can also make your own versions at home. There's recipes that you can find online. I would look for something that a dietitian has written up the recipe, but you can do things that are like coconut water, fruit juice with a little bit of salt in it, and that can kind of give you the same effect. Uh,
Hmm.
so that would be like if you want to do like more of a clean home version, that also can work, but you want to look up the correct proportions when you're making that.
So sugar is actually a good thing.
Yes.
Oh gosh, I can't see. Okay, so we've definitely hit the any foods young dancers should avoid
Mhm.
or limit. I mean, candy's not great.
Yeah.
Okay, not good, but
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah,
And then,
with
but
like,
stay away from the energy drinks.
yeah, no energy drinks for anyone, including adults. That is my one hard stance. But with, candy and everything, like everything else, I would say everything in moderation and in balance, right?
Hmm.
So candy's not a hard no, but should we be eating a lot of it? No, that's not healthy either. So I think
The
that's
dentist
something,
would agree.
yeah, yeah. And, obviously take good care of your dental health and all of that, brush your teeth, all of that.
And then how can I have a hard time with this. Well, I'll just, divulge some information here. I have two young dancers. I pick them up from school. I bring snacks that they can eat on the way to the studio,
Mhm.
and then they have their classes, and we don't get home until late. So I rely on, like before I leave to go get them from school, I throw things in the slow cooker
Mhm.
so that way we can eat as soon as we get home.
Great.
But we don't get home until like after 8 o'clock regularly. And then they
Mhm.
have, school in the morning. So luckily they're able to get their homework done early,
Mhm.
but it's a push to get food in them, and their time to eat at school is getting, I swear it's getting shorter and shorter each year.
I believe
Maybe
that.
I'm losing it and I'm
No, I
just
totally
remembering
believe
my
it.
childhood.
I
I swear it's
totally
like
believe it.
20 minutes to eat lunch. I can't eat that fast.
No,
Like
it's not
in
appropriate.
like high school, I used to bring Slim Fast for my lunches cuz
Mhm.
I didn't have time to eat anything. So I'd bring like a Cliff Bar that I could, eat in like 3 bites, and then I had my Slim Fast that I could drink because I'd be in the theater, building sets. I was the weird theater kid in high school, and I'm still the weird theater kid. That's why you're my friend. But yeah, there's just not a lot of time, and I mean, Slim Fast. There's like paper filler in that. Like it's so bad, but at the time there weren't like a lot of options.
Mhm.
So if you are strapped for time, are
So
there certain things that like are kind of an okay list and a bad list?
like kind of going off of that, like smoothies, that's great. Like if that's like liquids can be sometimes easier to get in when, especially if you're not super hungry. So that's like another good like breakfast on the go idea if you're not someone who's super hungry for like solid food. Sometimes that can
Hmm.
go down a little easier. Um, maybe I just want to like guess that a lot of that why you're so late at the studio is because you're teaching, not because your dancers are dancing that whole time, right?
One of them is.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well,
Mhm.
there's it's like the little one has classes and then the older
Mhm.
one has classes, but
Okay.
there's only one of me.
Yeah. So like when they're not dancing, could they be having like part of dinner? Like could they have, I don't know, like a half a sandwich or something to kind of tide them over during that time? Then when you get home, it would be, your normal dinner, but maybe if like let's say a whole plate is what they would normally eat of the dinner when you get home. Maybe they're eating half to three-quarters of a plate because they ate something earlier, just kind of naturally. But like, again, spacing it out, making it so that they're, it sounds like they're not super hungry, but like could be either they get ravenous or they kind of get past that point of hunger, which I know
Hmm.
that definitely happens to me if I eat really late, is like I at like 6 o'clock I'll be starving, but if I don't get to eat and then we get to like 8 or 9 o'clock, it's like I'm not even hungry anymore. Like we
It's
we
like you
missed
hit
the
that
window.
fasting
Yeah,
point.
so it could be that they just kind of need to put something in their system so they don't get past that point of hunger and like to the point where they're not hungry anymore.
Well, I'm very lucky. My husband will pick up the little one,
Good.
and then she'll eat usually cheese and crackers.
Hmm.
But if she's not careful, well, if she's not being watched, she will find all the food in the
Yeah.
house. So her, she kind of fends for herself, and the older one
Hmm.
will have, like, I'll bring her food, like
Hmm.
cheese and
Hmm.
like the cheese and, gosh, they used to have them at Costco and now they don't
Hmm.
anymore. But it was fruit and nuts and cheese in this one little packet, and I'd bring
Yeah,
those for her.
that's awesome.
So is that enough to kind of sustain her? Like snack in the truck and then like another snack until we get home for dinner, or should I be packing her
What
more?
what I would say to that is, are they asking for more food? Are they hungry? Like kids are, if we're not telling them what to eat, kids are really good with intuitive eating. They're really good at listening to their bodies. And just kind of with everyone, like we're society and what we're told kind of eventually overrides our innate signals. But kids are really good of like, if they're hungry, they're hungry. And that's telling you something. That means that they should be eating. For the most part, kids don't eat just to eat. Like if they're hungry, they should be eating because that means their body needs it.
So I guess
So I
they're
would be,
born with like the happy weight signal
yeah,
ability.
yeah. The way I like to say is like, with the exception of a couple of genetic metabolism diseases, for lack of a better word, there's a couple of things out there that can like truly screw with like those signals, but
Hmm.
99.9% of people don't have that. We are born being intuitive eaters. We know when we're hungry, we know when we're full, and if we are truly just listening to our body, it'll tell us that. And then everything from what we're told by parents, society, timing of like, this is the time to eat, this is the time not to eat, access to food, that all gets in there as kind of noise around losing our innate hunger and fullness cues. So if we kind of let kids just tell us if they're hungry or not. Like, as the parent, you get to decide what's being served, but the kid can decide how much they want to eat of it because
Hmm.
their body is telling them what it actually needs to sustain them and grow.
I know it's an issue at our house with, well, you have to eat this much of your dinner before you can have desserts.
Hmm.
Um, because I have to tell my little one, if you're not hungry enough for dinner, you're not hungry for dessert.
Hmm.
So that's kind of our rule. I don't know if that's instilling
It,
something
it
bad. Should I be more careful about that?
yes. For you and for all our listeners, I'm going to recommend looking up, it's called The Division of Responsibility in Feeding by Ellen Satter. This is discussing how to raise like healthy intuitive eaters essentially. So it's how to also like avoid food battles with your kids.
Hmm.
And it boils like I would highly recommend looking this up, reading about it. There's plenty of articles online about it. There's books that she's written, but it kind of boils down to the division of responsibility is the parent decides what food is being served and when it is being served. The child decides whether to eat and how much to eat. And that's just kind of like the general thing. So if we're serving dinner, you say, I'm serving mac and cheese and broccoli, take it or leave it. The kid decides how much mac and cheese and how much broccoli they're going to eat. They are not pushed to eat more than they want. If they don't touch the broccoli, it's okay. Like you should be like, this broccoli is really yummy, but like not forcing it on them if they don't eat it. Offering is good. Um, and her other thing is like, if you're going to be serving dessert, like that is just kind of along with the meal. So if you're having chocolate chip cookies with that meal, it'd be like, hey, we're having mac and cheese, broccoli, and chocolate chip cookies tonight. And if this is a brand new thing to your kids and family, yeah, they probably are going to skip the main meal and eat a bunch of cookies because who wouldn't do that if they don't normally get that? But as that becomes something that is very normalized, like when we have dessert, it's there and you can do what you want with it. They will start listening to their body and eating mix of different things. They'll have some broccoli and they'll have one cookie or whatever. Like it will start to click in when all food is really legalized. Because when we're saying you have to eat your broccoli or you can't have the cookie, what we're saying is, ooh, there's something real special about this cookie. Like the broccoli, ugh, that's horrible. I'm making you eat the broccoli. It's punishment, and you have to do that to get the reward. But if we're putting it all on a level playing field, it doesn't make the broccoli seem negative. So then they can really listen to their body. This kind of goes into like anytime I'm talking about getting someone to eat more intuitively, and this goes with adults as well, it's like their initial thought is always like, man, if I just let myself eat whatever I want, I'm just going to eat pizza and chocolate all day long and I'm never going to touch a vegetable. And it's like, no, you might do that for a couple days or even a week because you've been denying yourself that, or whatever, it's not served, but then you're going to start listening to your body, and we want different things every day. Sometimes it's like, oh my god, the thought of having chocolate right now is repulsive. Like I need something green in my life. Like
Hmm.
I've had days where it's like I will kill for an apple or a salad or something. It's like that's what my body is asking for. And there are other days where I'm like, oh my god, the thought of eating a vegetable just that sounds nauseating right now, and I want a cookie. And it really truly balances out. And that just comes from making all foods equal.
So I guess letting not just my not just my kids, but even myself, is
Yep.
it kind of
Yes.
a healthier approach to just put away like my nutrition monitoring app and just kind of try to listen to my body and eat whatever?
Yes. I see that hesitating. Yes. Um, in theory,
Ish.
yes. So I always wonder what people actually hear when I'm talking, like how you're actually processing this, because I think I make sense, but then I'm like, what was actually taken away from this? So yes. Um, and maybe this is something like you test it out on yourself first and then you are incorporating it more with your kids, or you can all do it together. Is really just the like, if I'm truly listening to my body right now, what is it asking for? And what I've kind of been hearing from you throughout this is like, especially with the I get so busy, I forget to eat, or I'm not hungry in the morning. Like, sounds like some of your hunger and fullness cues, or just like what you want in general, are really dialed down. Like you've pushed that off for so long that you're not truly, truly listening to what your body is saying. So I would be really curious to see like if you spent more time doing a check-in with your body, asking, am I hungry? What do I actually want? What sounds good? What's going to feel good in my body right now? And when you're eating, like, where am I at on the fullness scale? Like, do I want more? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel stuffed? Like, just really neutrally asking yourself these questions. And it's hard in the beginning when you haven't been doing it for a while, but over time, it becomes very natural because it is really natural. That's like how humans and all animals have survived, is we intuitively listen. Um, so I think that would be a really great place to start.
Do you have any kind of suggestions, pointers, how to be a better listener to your body?
Mm. Um,
because
I
I'm
think
really bad at that.
yeah, and it's hard for a lot of people, and I'm not perfect. No one's perfect with this, so I think a lot of it is also giving yourself grace and being very, very neutral with yourself, not judging yourself for what you want. Like if you do want to go eat a whole chocolate cake, like don't beat yourself up about it. Like just be neutral about it. You can ask questions around like, why do I feel like I want that right now? Like what have I been missing out on that's making me want that? That's going really specific. But to get in tune with listening to yourself, I think part of it is setting aside little check-in moments where you're not distracted. So you're not watching something, you're not doing something else. Like you literally, and this can take less than a minute. Like you just kind of step aside, just you can even close your eyes, just do a little body scan, like, what am I feeling right now? You can ask all those hunger questions, but could even be like, is there anywhere in my body that I'm sore right now? Like what does my body feel like? What does my stomach feel like? Hunger and fullness cues in themselves can physically manifest differently in different people. For some people, it's being hungry is getting towards, hopefully we don't get to this point, but like lightheadedness. It could be your stomach is feeling empty, or it could be gurgling, or you could have a little pain in your side, or it could just be like, I feel empty. There's so many different things that different people will experience, and at different like levels of hunger or fullness will experience. And it's a constant learning process. Like for instance, right now, I didn't have lunch before this. That was my bad. And I'm feeling my stomach, it almost feels like it's kind of collapsing in on itself, like in the
Mhm.
actual stuff, not like my body, but like my actual stomach organ is kind of just like, I want to, we need something in here because there's nothing holding the space open almost. It's a really weird way to describe it, but it's like, I need to put something in there soon because my stomach is shriveling up. It's so hungry. Um,
Get
so
me a raisin. Give me raisins.
and someone else would be like, I've never had that experience in my life. My body does this. So I think it's something where you get better at it as you practice it, just like anything else.
Mhm.
Like I will be upfront, I'm not a yogi, but like a lot of people that do yoga or meditation, the first time you do it, your mind is all over the place. You're like, am I doing this pose right? Am I thinking the right thing? Am I breathing the right way? And then as you've done it for years, you just settle into it and you can let the thoughts flow and you can breathe without thinking, I need to expand my stomach more or whatever. And you have like with dance even, right? So the first time you step up to a bar and you're doing plies, there's a lot of thought put into that. But once
Yeah,
you've
there's
been
a
doing
lot
it,
going on.
yeah, once you've been doing it for 20 years, you're like, oh, I go to the bar, my body naturally clicks in. I don't even think about it because this is just my warm up now.
Hmm.
So same thing with this. It's going to take more effort on the front end and it will become second nature and you'll be more aware of what you actually need as you go.
I think I need to schedule some food meditation time.
Yeah, I think it can be really helpful, like particularly before a meal to kind of start doing this because that's when you, in theory, should be hungry. So it's easier.
Hmm.
I think that with anything, the extremes are more noticeable. So if it's like, okay, we're coming up on when I normally eat lunch, let's do a pause, check in. What do I feel like? What does my hunger feel like? Because if you're anticipating food, you're probably going to be more hungry than you were an hour or two before that. So your cues are going to be a little bit stronger. So that could be an easier place to start of like, okay, I'm supposed to be eating lunch right now. My body is doing this thing. Noted. So next time I feel that thing happening, I'm probably hungry. And then we can start backing it up and like, okay, so that's me hungry because I haven't eaten in 5 hours. What happens at 4 hours? Like, what do I feel there? Like, oh, I actually am hungry. I shouldn't be waiting to 5 hours. Like, my body's doing this thing here, but I wasn't noticing it. So we can kind of start stepping it back.
Goodness, I have a lot of homework. I need to make sure that I fix myself so I don't model bad behavior for
Yeah.
my kiddos.
Yeah.
Um, speaking of bad behavior in younger kiddos, how young do you see dancers especially developing young food habits? Like I know with social media,
Mm,
I mean growing up I knew like two people with an eating disorder and now there are just so many.
yeah. Um, Specifically eating disorders in dancers, I don't know that that data has been collected. I know that we're seeing eating disorders younger and younger in general. I've heard of kids as young as 6 years old having full-blown eating disorders, which is just nuts.
Sad. Yeah.
So just briefly, eating disorders can occur at any age, in any gender, any socioeconomic status, any race and ethnicity, just to put that all out there. But where we typically see the onset is puberty through early 20s is kind of like the peak time that they're going to show up for the first time. Not
Mm-hmm.
always. And then we see higher rates in the aesthetic sports, so dance, and we see a lot higher rates in the LGBTQ plus population.
Hmm.
Um, and that's, I think, a lot because of body dysphoria, body image standards, and a way of coping with the different mental things. So, eating disorders are not a true addiction. It's not about the food. It's considered a process addiction. It's a way of coping. So, for an eating disorder to develop, there needs to be a genetic component. So, the person will be predisposed to potentially developing an eating disorder. They might never express it. And then there is an environmental trigger or need to have a coping mechanism that will make the eating disorder show up. So something stressful, a trauma, which is I think why we see it higher in the LGBTQ plus population because there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of trauma and stress surrounding that. Um, and then we also add into that uh, how society views bodies and diets and what's social norm and all of that, or what was modeled for them. So all of those are factors into this. So when we think of dancers and eating disorders, a lot of it is modeling. So what are parents, teachers, peers talking about with diets? Obviously, we have social media adding into all of that as well. All the influencers talking about stuff, all the
Mm-hmm.
diet pills and meds and now Ozempic and everything out there. And then we also have that it's an aesthetic body sport of they're staring at themselves in a mirror all the time. They're in tight fitting clothes or leotards. They need to fit into costumes. Some um, companies have weight requirements, which I think is awful. If they're doing partner work or teamwork, like, do I need to be lighter so I can be lifted? If I, look a certain way or lose weight, am I more likely to get certain parts or to jump higher or whatever it is? So,
Oh, I had a weight contract. Like if you gained or lost 5 pounds, you could be fired.
yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah. This is why this is so needed.
Yeah,
Gosh, I know we've touched on an awful lot. Like
yeah,
my brain is it's a lot more full than when I started.
yeah,
Now I need to adjust my stomach to match.
yeah.
But is there anything we haven't touched on that you want everyone to walk away with knowing? Or maybe we covered everything.
No, there definitely is. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. I think the biggest thing is number one, that you are so worthy just as you are. Like, you are a human being. You don't need to change yourself. If you're a dancer, like, dance should be joyful. And yes, for some people, it's a career or, something really a major part of your life, but you got into it because it was joyful. And so let that be really a big part of it. And you're athletes. And so we need to look at this not as some trendy diet to follow because you're a dancer. You need to treat yourself like an athlete, and that requires proper sports nutrition and care of your body, your instrument. That's how you're going to excel not only in dance, but in life. So take good care of that one body that you get for this life.
Oh, yes. Such, oh my gosh, golden little nuggets. Actually, they're more than that. I'm just failing at words right now. Probably because I have to go eat something.
Same, same.
This is what happens to me when I know I need food because I'm stumbling on my words.
And if you've been listening to this whole long podcast episode and you haven't eaten in that time, it's probably time for you to go get something to eat too.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so very much, Libby. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and I wish, gosh, the more people we can get this information to, I think the better, because you blew my mind.
Well, thanks. It's been so much fun chatting with you about this. Obviously, this is my passion, so it was super fun. And for any, dance studio owners or anyone listening, you can book me for talks to your groups. I frequently speak at BFA and MFA programs and conservatories, dance studios, so you can hire me to speak to your dancers or your group.
And you do those virtually as well as in person?
Yes, I do both.
Oh, wonderful. And where can people reach you for that?
Check out my website, thebroadwaydietitian.com. It's all going to be in the show notes, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
And my email, phone number, all that stuff is there.
Well, thank you again so very much, Libby, and to all of our listeners. Make sure you, um, like, follow, and the notes for how to reach Libby and a little kind of takeaways will also be commented on this. And again, thank you so very much, Miss Libby, and for everyone watching. Thank you, thank you, thank you.